Okay, I should start the interview by saying thank you so much for taking the time out to sit down and chat with me. I suppose we should start at the very beginning. So, how did your love of theatre begin?
Oh man. So it all really began. I mean, I've always been into movies. Like it was
Hmm.
my VHS collection at my, growing up, which was like the most random VHS collection of all time. It was like All Dogs Go to Heaven and Bambi. Like that, you know what I mean? Very random, deep 90s niche pulls. I really connected with that first. And then but as a kid, you're like, the movie is something separate and
Hmm.
people aren't involved in the movie, you know? And then I distinctly remember I was at a summer camp and my friend was like, "Oh, I'm in Beauty and the Beast tonight. We're doing our performance. Like, you should come see it." And I was like, "Okay." Actually, no, it was the Magical Sleepover, which was sort of it's like a medley of Disney songs
Ah, right, okay.
with like the framing of like some random child. Peter Pan comes to get a random child.
We did a very similar story in my school.
Exactly, exactly. It's like it's under the sea, and that's the big thing, but it's like kind of cobbled together. I had notes, let me put it that way. And I saw this, what I can only imagine in hindsight must have been like the rinkiest, dinkiest production of this thing. But for me, I was like, wow, kids are singing Under the Sea and it sounds like Under the Sea. This is crazy. Like, how are they doing this? And that the girl who invited me, I don't remember her name, but wherever she is, um, and I was like, "How did you do this?" And so the next year, I like signed up. I was like, "I'm going to be doing this theater thing," and we did The Wizard of Oz,
Hmm.
and I was cast as the Munchkin Mayor, and I acted like I had been cast as Dorothy.
Fantastic.
And that's really that production of Wizard of Oz is like really what got me into this, where I was like, wow, like I can do this and it's
Hmm.
somewhat easy, although terrifying, you know? That was really my first experience where I was like, this is for me.
Hmm. And so, from performing other people's shows, how did you get into writing your own shows and into sort of the writing side of it?
Yes. So I always wrote my own little stories and little things always. And I'm a very bossy person. So I feel like being bossy goes hand in hand with being the writer, where you're like, this is what we're doing.
This is
So
exactly
I
what it's
was
got to look like.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I always had this thing. I went to theater school, or I majored in theater, and then I graduated, and then I moved to New York City, and I was like, I'm going to be Meryl Streep. I'm going to be a serious actor. And I auditioned for all the MFA programs, and I didn't get into any. And I was like, okay, well, am I going to spend the next year re-practicing my Shakespeare monologues to try again? Or, is there something I can do that's like a bit more what I would find productive? Do you know what
Mhm.
I mean?
Yeah.
Like not just like waiting around for somebody to like maybe say yes, you know? And so here in New York, we have Upright Citizens Brigade, which is like the premier comedy school in New York. Um, and I was like, you know what? I'll just do improv and I'll take improv there and like see where it takes me. And through doing improv and taking sketch classes, I sort of was like, you know what? I'm kind of funny. Like, let me write my own stuff. It's definitely in this crazy world somehow easier for me to produce writing my own stuff
Mhm.
than is, waiting for somebody to pick me in a lineup. So it started there where like by doing, sketch and characters, it was very much like, well, the next thing is to like make a 30-minute show. And so I started with that. And then I sort of was like, this is what I really enjoy actually is
Hmm.
like producing my own stuff. Because I'm also a producer by trade. I work for NBC News.
Wow.
And so I said, why don't I use those skills to my
Hmm.
advantage? And it sort of ended up being exactly the right thing for me in the long run.
Hmm. Obviously, we've hinted at there the show that you are currently working on, Love in the Time of the Fifth Grade. So, where did that idea come from originally? How did it start?
It started when I was born. No, it started sort of in two ways. So when I was in college, I got really into solo shows, and I was
Mhm.
like, "Oh, this is for me. I love solo artists. I'm the next Whoopi Goldberg. That was my, again, I'm always like, who am I the next of whatever? And so I sat around, and at the time I was sort of in a low in my dating life. And so I came up with this concept that I called Desert of Labia. And it was about how I was the sheriff to the ghost town of my vagina. Sorry to get TMI up in here. And so I was like, basically, that show, the thrust of it was like, why am I single? And so like I interviewed my parents about it, and had all these like
Wow.
character bits and like puppets and cobwebs. It was a whole like thing. And then part of that was like I basically wrote down the history of my dating life from elementary school all the way till what had been
Mhm.
at that point. And then I sort of tucked this show away. I got distracted by other things. And then I had a hankering. I wanted to do like a storytelling show. And I said, you
Mhm.
know what? Why don't I dust off these materials and make it a bit simpler and really go back to like, what were the elements here that made me really excited, that I think really tell my voice? And I found that it was those stories. Um, those stories being like these grand passions that I had when I was 10, under the age of 10 in primary school. And then I had all these like horror stories from like my early 20s, which, we all
We
have.
all do.
Hopefully, I'm not alone in that. And so looking at these two things, I was like, I think this is the
Hmm.
new iteration of this. I think this is what really allows me to better share my voice, and how my comedy has now
Hmm.
developed to what it is to this. So it kind of had like two restarts, if you will.
Hmm.
Hopefully a third. No, I'm just kidding.
It's a bit late. It's only 2 months till Edinburgh.
Yeah,
So,
I know. I'm like, oh, can I try it out now? No.
obviously, you said about coming back to the sort of stories that you were writing about your childhood. So, when you were going, right, this is the show I'm putting on, was there sort of edits and sort of formatting to make it all fit together, or did it just all kind of naturally line up?
So originally, I sort of sat down and I was like, let me just get this all out.
Hmm.
My dad once, when I was in school, like writing essays, I was like, I don't know how to write these essays. And my dad was like, it's very easy. You just puke on the page,
Hmm.
and then 2 days later, you go back and you clean up the
Hmm.
mess. And that really always stuck with me because that's how I write everything now, which is like just get it out, messy as it is, and then sort of. So I just was like, let me just write all the stories that I want to write. And so I put them all on the page, and then I sort of realized, like, okay, I've got, I think, 5 or 6 of these, I'm going to call them child stories, 5 or 6 of these adult stories. And then I met with somebody, and they were like, I think it'd be more interesting if you alternated between these things and kind of finding like, with this kid story, how does it connect to this adult story? Is there a
Hmm.
connection, or like, how can we like amplify these by kind of alternating? And that was like a big shift for me because I was like, that is genius.
Hmm.
Shout out to Gabe. He gave me that note. And then from there I just started workshopping it. So kind of once I had the framework, I just started going out and workshopping it and testing all the jokes and stuff like that and then rewriting new jokes. And then I actually had to cut it down to 30 minutes for this festival that I was a
Hmm.
part of. And then when I decided, okay, I'm going to go to Edinburgh, it needs to be an hour, it was like, okay, so of the things that I cut, what goes back in here? And then I realized some of the stories that I had, I was like, oh, these aren't so great. And that was actually really interesting because this interview is going to get very TMI, and unfortunately, that's my style.
No problem at
And
all.
so, and so for a long time, I was really embarrassed by my virginity story. Like, I didn't even tell my friends about it because I was so embarrassed. And then I had one night with my friends where I was like, because they were like, what did you not include in the show? And I was like, well, I've got this virginity story. And, I started telling them
Hmm.
about it. And they were like, that's really funny. And I was like, you know what? I think I've hit the point with this where I
Hmm.
think it's funny now. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
maybe 10 years ago wasn't funny, but now I'm like, and so that was kind of a big risk for me where I was like, let me put that in. And then that I feel like really sort of
Hmm.
opened it up, really added some stakes, really added some. So I know your question was very direct and I gave you a very non-direct answer, but I guess I just start by putting it all on the
Mm,
page and then just with every time that I do it, being like, are these pieces working? Are these pieces melting? Is there another story out there I'm not thinking about? Should I be putting that in? Kind of working on it that way.
totally. And obviously, you mentioned there the sort of stories from yesteryear, from your past. So, what is it like, sort of reliving those moments on stage, sort of bringing those things that you've gone through that may be traumatic or embarrassing to life again?
Ugh, fabulous. I mean, my show is very, let me state by saying, my show is very joyful, so
Hmm.
I don't have, would never make light of anybody's trauma about anything. When I say these things were traumatic, they were, I would say
Hmm.
diet trauma.
Yeah, sort of teenage drama.
Teenage trauma. Exactly. That's how I would say that because I don't want to, I don't want to
Mm,
make it sound like
yeah,
I'm
totally.
misrepresenting anybody's experience. But, these are all sort of like baby traumas that really stuck with me for a very long time. And, it's really wonderful to laugh at them. My ethos, I sort of have two ethoses with comedy, but the first is like, it's a way to like manage my embarrassment. It's a
Hmm.
way for a person to release their embarrassment. I mean, think about like all those horror stories that you have from your life. And then when you tell it to somebody and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. You like feel this sense of
Hmm.
relief where you're like, other people have experienced something similar, or maybe they haven't, but they can see how ridiculous the
Mm.
situation is, Like I'll never forget, I went to this comedy show once and this woman did this whole extended bit about how like basically she had a bowel movement attack right in the middle of an interview. And so she like
Oh.
had to run to the bathroom and there was no toilet paper. And she was describing this thing and I was crying because I was like, how many times has
Hmm.
that something similar happened to me? Do you know what I mean? And
Totally.
like what a blessing that this woman, I mean, obviously she turned into a bit, God bless her, but you know what I mean? It was like,
Mm.
like what joy. It's like, yeah, we've all been there where you're in the bathroom and there's no toilet paper and you're like, what am I going to do? And I'm
Hmm.
sweating. And so for me, it's really liberating to
Hmm.
say, I don't need to hide behind this thing anymore. I don't need to hide behind the embarrassment that that random guy who was in my improv group rejected
Hmm.
me. I think I'll live. I think there are worse things that can happen to a person.
Mm.
And so that's like for me what it makes me feel really free
Mm.
to kind of not that I believe that the theater experience is only about me, but I think in being able to be free about these things and to share them, my hope is that it invites people to free their own embarrassment and
Mm.
to say, you know what, I went through something similar as that lady. And if she cannot be up here talking about it, then I can
Yeah.
be in my life talking about it.
Totally. Obviously, you mentioned earlier that the flicking between very young childhoods to more recent times, and obviously being the performer in the show, you have to capture both those sort of time frames. So, does the sort of settings change how you approach the story and how you bring it to life?
It's a really interesting question. I think it's interesting. When I talk about my childhood stories, I think, there's no way to deny that there's a sort of nostalgic
Mm.
lens to these things. Um, and my memory of them is very like cinematic.
Hmm.
Like I feel like when I think back in my mind's eye, I learned this recently, by the way. Some people like the way that the brain works, I didn't realize like I hear an inner voice and I see an inner picture, and not everybody does that.
Oh.
I learned recently. Some people just see darkness, and I was like, what? Um, I see, when I flash through the little cinema in my brain of, what happened to me or, what I
Mm.
experienced as a child, like it is always very cinematic. And then I feel like right around high school, it starts to kind of become more real, more gritty, if you
Hmm.
will. And so in that way, I do feel like when I talk about my childhood self, it is a bit more flowery. It is a bit more, I don't want to say exaggerated, but sort of like elevated.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? It's a bit more, the stakes are very, very hard. Whereas I feel like when I talk about my adult life, I'm like, these stakes, where are they? You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like, it's fine, But when I talk about that time, it's like whether you married that guy in your class meant life or death to you,
Hmm.
And
Mm.
so I feel like it sort of came up organically that that's how that
Mm,
happened, where I feel like when I talk about my childhood self, I take it actually in a way more seriously,
mm.
a little bit more dramatically than when I talked about my future story. My future stories, I'm like, look, this, I'm going to tell you a sad tale, and this is the sad tale. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
let's laugh at just like, I say this in a loving way to myself, like how loserish this whole setup is, you know? And then when I talk about my young self, it's like, oh my God, I had a foreign lover in Italy. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? We had one peck on the beach. He was a foreign lover, you know, because that's how I thought about him. Even in my diary, when I wrote about him, you know, I
Mm.
said, we kissed last year and we are in love. Would I say that about a boyfriend I had for years? I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Obviously, you mentioned there the diary, and I know the diary appears in the show itself, as well as a mysterious song, musical number. So, what is it like, sort of embedding those multimedia into your show? What was it like including them?
Fabulous. I knew that I wanted this to be so the backbone of my show is a PowerPoint.
Hmm.
Um, and I knew that I wanted that mostly because my show, given that I grew up in the early 2000s, it has a lot of Y2K references.
Hmm.
As we know, some of those translate across the pond and some of those don't. And
Hmm.
so, and even here, like when I do it in New York, some people get references. Like I have a reference to Casino, the Scorsese movie, and I feel like, yeah, exactly. Hits with a dud like 95% of the time, which was so surprising to me. I'm like, aren't we all talking about Casino? Um, so for that reason, I was like, it has to be a PowerPoint
Mm,
because some of these things, first of all, I know nobody has seen
mm,
or is going to get, but they're fundamental to me, so I have to explain them. And I think the visual, just the
mm,
visual helps. And also, you know, I think I talk about me at so many different stages, and I love school pictures
mm.
in general. I love looking at my school pictures. I love looking at people's school pictures. Like it's like they got you on your worst day,
Yeah, always.
always. And yet that's the you that's immortalized. Do you know what I mean? Like, and so I was like, I want to bring these school pictures
Mm,
out because again, I think we all see our middle school picture and laugh. You know,
mhm.
we all see that in like one of my middle school pictures that I show. I'm like, you know, I'm not smiling. And I realized I was like, because my dad told me I had braces, and he was like, "You're just not going to smile till they're gone." You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
stuff like that. That's like so silly. Like, you know, so I feel like honestly, when I was coming to Edinburgh, I was like, I might have an easier time getting a venue and doing free fringe if I don't have a slideshow. And
Mm,
when I thought about removing the slideshow, I was like, it kind of takes
mm.
away a piece of my core. Not to mention everybody that I mentioned in my show, I draw as a stick figure in MS Paint. So to deny the world my little stick figure drawings of people that have either destroyed me in the past or been a great love would be denying, you know, Scotland this privilege. So, yeah, I really love it because it allows me to better, you know,
Mm,
express my thing, and it allows the show to mix up a bit because not that I want to install, excuse me, not that I want to insult stand up.
mm,
Love stand up, but my show isn't necessarily stand
mm,
up. And so I think it sort of helps to say, oh, yeah, this is more theatrical than just a straight up stand up
mm,
hour.
Totally. Obviously, you mentioned there the stick figures on MS Paint. So the first question popped into my head: were they from childhood, or did you draw them a couple of weeks ago?
Oh, I drew that. I've drawn them. Yeah, this whole time. I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't get internet until my freshman year of high
Mm,
school. So my dad got me like the Dell computer, the big fancy like 2003 Dell computer that everybody had. But the only things I had on it were like Minesweeper
hmm.
and MS Paint, and then he got me the discs of Encyclopedia Britannica.
Right.
So that was all I had on that thing, which also makes me laugh. It's like you got me this whole computer and then like couldn't do any, you know, I wanted to play my Disney Channel games, could
Hmm.
not. And so, um, I spent a lot of time like doodling little, garden scenes in MS Paint, little beach scenes in MS Paint. And so it was like a big thing for me. And so when I was thinking about, I wanted to show the people that I was talking about in my
Hmm.
show, but I don't want to get sued.
Yeah.
And I know some people, sometimes you can show a picture and you can put a blackout bar over their eyes. And I was like, I feel like it just makes them look like a criminal,
Yeah.
And so that's when I came back to MS Paint and I was like, it's all I had then, it's all I have now. Like what a way to use what I was using then to express myself, to express these
Mm.
people honestly better because, they have since grown and moved on and some of them have children, God bless. And, you know, I think it helps to kind of actually preserve them in my memory.
Mm.
It's like the audience gets to see my memory of them. Whether they look like that or not, honestly, doesn't even matter.
Mm.
But yeah.
You've just unlocked a really weird core memory in me. And for ages on MS Paint, I had drawn my own wallpaper for the computer screen. But not that this is really that important, but I'd spelt my dad's name wrong. So for years we had a picture of on our home screen that just had his name spelt wrong. Um,
I love that. I love that. Every girl I drew had a ponytail because that was the only hair I could figure. You know what I mean? It was like,
yeah.
well, okay, it's a girl, because anything else looked too confusing. So yeah, it's funny how that works.
Mm. But as well as showing, obviously, writing the show, showing off your artistic abilities, and performing, you are the only performer on the stage in the production. So does that add pressure to you?
No, I love it. No. Yeah, no, it doesn't really add pressure. I mean, it's funny. I always get the anxiety,
Hmm.
I'm gonna forget all my lines, I'm gonna forget who I am. Um, but at the same time, I always feel like when I get up there and I kind of get that first laugh and I kind of am able to lock in, I go.
Mm.
I'm one of those people that blacks out,
Hmm.
where like I always have to record my performance because I won't remember what I improvised or what I did. And I love that. I love
Mm.
that feeling. I love the feeling of like, okay, we're in this together. Even if a joke doesn't hit, again, I mentioned casino as a joke. It hits literally 0 times. Then I get to play with the audience on that. Be like, you guys
Mm.
haven't seen casino? Like, come on, So uh, yeah, obviously it's nerve-wracking, but I've been on enough improv teams now that I feel
Mm.
like I've earned it.
I suppose you have the sort of special advantage of that you wrote the show, the stories are about you, and you're bringing them to life. So it's kind of like no one that's going to know anyway if you slip up, but also you're going to be like, well, that's what I thought of myself back
You know
then.
what's crazy? It's like, yes, and also I actually have an easier time with that mentality when I'm performing somebody else's work.
Mm.
And for a long time, I actually got a little bit of stage fright of performing my own work because it was like I worked so hard
Hmm.
to write these jokes. If I get them wrong, I'm going to have a conniption.
Mm.
But to your point, it was like, Marina, what does it matter? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's your life story. And that's the mantra I say to myself before I go on stage to calm myself from forgetting a joke or forgetting a line. I'm like, Marina, it's your life story.
Mm.
It's your life story. Like you could say anything. It's going to be fine. But yeah, I actually had the inverse feeling for a very long time, which was like, I have to get this right or else, my writing ability, cat on the
Mm.
wall, like I'm going to be haunted by the fact that I messed that up or whatever. Um, and I think that came from doing sketch and from doing like character monologues,
Mm.
which are really precise forms. And that's why I ended up doing what I'm doing now, which is a little bit more looser so that I
Mm.
could attain that feeling finally and be like, you know
Mm.
what? Whatever happens, happens,
Is what it is. Yeah. But obviously we've talked about the sort of the show writing and the sort of early stages of rehearsal, but you obviously got a fairly exciting announcement recently that you are heading to this year's Edinburgh Fringe. So
Yes.
what was it like getting that message, that notification that you are heading to the world's biggest theatre festival?
Well, I'll admit that I was a little crazed in
Mm.
that I feel like I was like sort of waiting up until the last minute to hear from some places, and then I didn't hear from them. And then there was a 24-hour period there where I was like, I guess I'm not going.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like after all this planning and all this, whatever, whatever. And then a last minute thing kind of like came together that was actually perfect. Because as I said, my show requires a slideshow, requires a projector. And that was something that I thought wouldn't be difficult. Turns
Mm,
out incredibly difficult
yeah.
to like figure out the whole projector thing. And so ended up with a place that has a TV screen that connects to a lot. Like suddenly it was like after all this stress, a
Mm,
random opportunity came up that was perfect, which was with Bra. I hope I'm saying that correctly, Bra venues. And um, then it was magical, especially being on that whole roller coaster where it was like, I guess I'm not going. And then it was like,
yeah.
I think I am going with
And
a
everything's working
great
perfect.
setup,
Yeah.
like it was like, wait a minute. And everybody's really, I mean, everybody I interact with is very kind and nice, but it was like, and everybody's super nice. Like this can
Mm,
only, and then at that point, it was like, I have kind of it's been my 10-year dream to go to
hmm
Edinburgh Fringe Festival. So to finally be able to go, to finally be able to see it, to bring my own work, it is a really meaningful to me. And I feel like it sort of is the climax of this, I would say, this first phase of
Mm,
my creative career, which is to finally make it there, and to finally do this there. And then figuring out, okay, what's our next
hmm
10-year dream? What's our next really big goal?
mm.
So I'm really proud to even just be showing up.
And how are you getting ready for that long journey to Edinburgh?
um, Crying. No, I'm just kidding.
I wouldn't blame you.
Luckily, I'm like not there yet. I feel like
Mm,
that'll probably hit 2 weeks before I go. Really tapping back into the community of people that
mm,
I'm so privileged to know that have gone, that have been so kind to share their experience with me and deal with all my last minute texts of like, wait a minute, when am I supposed to be printing these flyers?
mm,
How many am I supposed to be printing? Like, I feel like a lot of my experience in these last months have been sitting peacefully, being like, okay, I booked everything. Wait, how am I going to have internet?
mm.
Like, okay, I figured out the internet. Wait, how many flyers am I supposed to print? Like it's
Yeah.
a lot of like that. And so, trying to embrace that as it comes and being in denial that it's happening. And then when it's there, I'll head it on. I have this finale song that you
hmm
mentioned, and I wanted to have a costume reveal. And then I was like, am I running out of time? And then I was like, no, I need to do the costume reveal so that I can have something to do before I go that's
hmm
going to distract from the anxiety of everything else. Like, let me be anxious about building this skirt that,
hmm
if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen,
Yeah.
but it would be cool. And it's a way for me to channel all that energy.
Mm. We are coming to the end of my questions. I have a couple more. So obviously we've talked about the show, and but if people are interested to get tickets or to stay up to date with you, where can they do so?
Well, you can go to the Edinburgh Fringe
Hmm
website. I'm the only marina. So if you just
Nice.
type in marina, like where a boat parks, Marina and the Diamonds. I'll think of another Marina exit. Marina in the movie Sinbad that starred Brad Pitt.
hmm
And okay, see, some of my references, some of them they hit. If you search Marina, I will come right on up. I'm doing the first 2 weeks. So I start August 7th and I go to August 20th. And I'm at 2:30 p.m. and you can book your tickets there. I'm with Bra Venues, as I said. Again, fingers crossed that that's correct. And pronunciation BRAW Venues. And I am at venue 41 on Hill Street. So that's where you can find me. Um,
Fantastic. I'll put the links in the comments below so people can scroll down and get their tickets. But my final question is, what advice do you have for young performers looking to do what you do?
just do it. I'm going to
Mm,
quote Shia LaBeouf. Just do it. I think Kafta also has a quote that's do it now,
hmm
which is like, it can be so easy to be like, oh, well, I'm traveling for these next two
hmm
months and then I'll start my draft when I'm feeling good and comfortable. You're never going to feel good and comfortable.
Yeah.
Your job's going to get crazy. Then the Christmas is going to hit and then you got to buy 10 gifts for your mom and help her
hmm
cook. And then it's game over. And then you're in the next year. So do what you can, do it now. When you feel that spark, write it down. Even as, you're not sitting at that formal blank document with the
hmm
coffee at the cafe. You're on your iPhone, get it down.
hmm
Because even if you don't start writing it then, you'll go back to that random iPhone note and be
Hmm.
like, right, oh my God. Or you'll see that random iPhone note and be like, oh, right, I had that idea. Let me get started. That's what I would say is just do it. Just do it. Don't feel like, oh, people aren't doing this. Blah, blah. Oh, hit my mic. Um, don't be bothered with any of that. Just do
Mm,
it.
totally fantastic. So I started the interview by saying, but I'll end the same way. Thank you so much for taking the time out to sit down and chat with me. As I said, I'll put the links in the comments below so people can scroll down and click away. I obviously wish you the best of luck at the Edinburgh Fringe, and I shall speak to you soon.